Welcome guys, welcome to this video. In this video we are going to create this shortener URL shortener application using Laravel and VueJS. So I have the database set up for URLs. If I take a URL from here and paste in here, I click process URL, it gives us the shortened URL, and when you click on the copy text here, it automatically copies the text. So if I remove this and paste, now you can see it already copied the text by clicking here. So that's also going to be implemented. We will create a Vue component in Laravel 8 application. So let's get started. Alright guys, to start with, first of all we need to create a brand new Laravel project. So here is the Laravel website and the link is in the description. I'm going to scroll down here and we look for composer command. So it's right here. So I'm just going to copy this command. Now I need to open the PowerShell and I'm going to go to the desktop. So desktop, and here I'm going to run this command. Make sure you have Composer installed. If you haven't installed Composer, you can follow the link from the description. Here I'm going to give the folder a name. It's going to be URL project, and we need to wait till this project creates completely, so it will take some time. It already added the folder here. Alright guys, the application is up, so we can, if we go back to documentation, it is suggested to go inside the application using cd and then run the PHP artisan serve. We're gonna do the same, so I'm gonna go here cd and then URL project, and here PHP artisan serve. So it's gonna give us the development server, and I'm gonna copy the link here and we go back here and just run it, and you can see our application is up now. Now this folder I need to open in VS Code, so I have the VS Code here and I open it here. Here it is. In .env file we have the database connection. So currently we don't have any database, and I have the XAMPP running in my local system, so make sure you have the XAMPP installed and running. If not running, we're gonna have problem, so make sure it is running. Link is in the description if you don't know where to download it. Here what we need to do, simply, if it is running, we can go to localhost/php myadmin, and there we need to create a database table. So here I need to create a table URL underscore project. Alright, we're going to copy the name so that we put in the .env file, so it's here. Now here where we have database, I'm going to replace it with this. So yeah, that's what we need for now. Now we go back to the PowerShell. Now we need to go into the same folder, project folder. So I go here, cd desktop /URL project. Alright, I'm inside the folder. Now here we need to generate scaffolding for the login and also setting up the view. So for that I'm going to install a Vue composer command I'm going to run. So here it's going to be the Laravel UI command first of all, and we need to wait till it completes. Alright, it completed. Now we need to generate the login and register pages, so I'm going to run the UI auth, and you can see authentication scaffolding generated. Now we need to run the npm install. So I say npm install. Alright, it is complete. Now we're going to run npm run dev to compile all the JS files. So now it is suggesting us to run the npm loader, Vue loader. So I'm going to copy this command and paste here. Alright, all done. Now we run the npm run dev again. Okay, we get this error. Now if you face the similar error, we need to update the Vue loader. So npm update Vue loader, and that should fix it. Now it's installed. Now need to run npm run dev. Now this is important for if we want to use the Vue components, so we need to run the npm run dev, and you can see then Laravel is compiled successfully. Now if I go back to the browser here, refresh, you see a login and register page. If I go to login page, we have here a login page and register page working. Alright, so first thing first, we want to change this page. So for that, what we want to do, we want to I want to go back to the text editor, and in routes, if I open this here, web.php, we have this route which is responsible for the front page. So it's welcome.blade file, which is inside the views. So here it is. So first thing first, I want to change the name of it. So I'm going to change it to URL Shortener. All right, that makes more sense here as we are working on URL Shortener app. So I rename this too, otherwise it won't work. So I'm just going to paste that here. Now, as the name is same, it should be working without any issue. Then what we need to do, I open this file, and here we need to put some code. So first of all, I'm going to delete everything. So here, now if I go back to files, due to we generated the login scaffolding using Vue, we have the layouts. And if I go in layout, we have an app.play layout here. And you can see that it has some HTML going on here. And the div ID app, and it is enabling the view. So if I go to the resources.js and app.js and scroll down, you can see that view is binding to this ID. So we can use the VueJS. So we're going to use this layout file. For doing that, we need to say here add extends, and simply you want to say layout.app. So it's going to extend that. So it's a layout actually, so we need to say layouts. And also, if we want to add something, so if I want to add a style, we're going to say section, and we're going to give it the name style, and styles, so here, and section. Alright, so any CSS I put inside here is going to be injected in this layout file. And where exactly it is going to be injected, we have here, if I scroll down, we have yield content here. The same way we can inject the CSS just right here. Instead of yield content, we just need to say yield styles. So it is going to inject it right here. The same way we have here the content. So for that, I copy this and paste. So we saw there was content, so we need to put content. So any HTML you need to put, you put here. Alright, so let's do that. I'm going to add some content here. Now for the content, I want to use a Vue component because we will be using VueJS in this project. So if I go back here in resources.js, you can see components. And there is an example component created by default by Laravel. So we want to use a component. So we are going to create another. So for that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a component in this directory, and I'm going to call this component URL Shortener .view. All right. So when you create a component, you need to register that component, and you can register it inside app.js. If you go here in this file, you will see there is already a sample component registered. You can see here, view component, sample component. So I just copy this line and paste here, and I'm going to call URL Shortener here dash. All right, and the same way we need to call the component file name. So here, URL Shortener.view. And we can copy this as we just register the component. We go back to close the example component and app.js. We go back to the blade file here. I want to create a div, and I'm give it a class wrapper underscore URL underscore Shortener. Alright, and inside it, and also we need to pass an ID so that we can use the Vue.js. So here ID app. Now inside it we can call the component. So paste the component like this and close like this. So that component will render here in this, and this will going to be injected into our layout file. All right. So now we can work with this URL shortener. So currently it is empty. So for by default we have example.component, so we can copy everything from there to save our time. So I'm just gonna copy from there and paste here. Now we have template, then we have a div with the class container and the script at the bottom, right? So what we can do, we can use the similar structure. Now first thing first, I want to see if it is working. So we just delete this content from here. I'm gonna say here hello, and we save this now. So if I go back currently and refresh, it will work. So we need to run the npm run dev to compile it. So I'm just gonna do that first. And you can also use your npm run watch if you don't want to run this command again and again. So that will do this automatically. I go back to browser, refresh the page, and we have hello here, and that's working fine. So we have the top login register like this because we are extending the layout file, and that is that uses this. So if I inspect and console log, so we can if we face any error, we can check there. Now I'm gonna proceed from here. So go back to the URL shortener.vue file, and here we need to add content in this. So let's do that. So here it's I remove the hello, and here I'm gonna create a class div with the class of row, and then I say div cool md12, and then inside it I'm gonna say div with the class of shortener. Alright, and inside it what we want to do, we want to say div with the class now this is going to take some time, and we're just gonna add some designing so that we have the HTML ready. If you want to skip the part to the JS part, you can do that, otherwise you can follow along. So here I'm gonna say section and heading. Alright, now the section heading, I want text to be centered, so here I'm gonna say text center. Inside it we can have now h1, and here I want to say URL as it's going to be the title URL shortener. Then we can put a break here, and after break we say div with the class of py2 and also line center. So line, let's say center. And inside this div, what we want to do, we want to create another div, and I want to pass its page intro description. Alright, now we can also give it some class like order and order info p3, it's a padding, and then margin bottom to 0. So it's like that. Now here inside we can put some content like professional URL shortener, or anything you want to say here. Free and advanced. Alright, so this is going to be mainly the title there. Then we can add here break tag, and after that here I want to create a form. Now I want to generally in the URL shortener you can straight away shorten your URLs, but I want to put it behind the login. So for that, what I do, let's first add the form and then we will check for the user login. So here I say form, and I'm going to pass a class of form as well. And here inside this form, we're going to have a div with the class of input group. And here we want to have input, and we want to give it a class of form control. Alright, it's going to be type text, and I want to use the V model, so I'm going to pass a V model URL. That way we're going to use the VueJS variables here, properties, and here what I want to do, I want to say also I want to give it a class, so let me go back. And class going to be add URL input, and we also need to have an ID of this particular input, and that's going to be, let's give it a P1 for now, simple ID. Alright, so we have our input there. Now we need to have a button, so I said div, and I want to pass a button, and this button is going to have class of bdn, and I guess a bdn dark, or a darker button. Inside it, let's simply say we could say process, or we can change it if we need to. So here simply now currently we have our form. Let's see how it looks. So we need to compile it, npm run dev, and refresh. Alright, so this is how it looks so far. We have an error here, URL is not defined. So we will be checking that. So what we need to do here, you can say here process URL. Also, there is some spacing problem we have. We have button touching there, so we can use some spacing in between. So I just put a BR here. And now I also, let's deal with that error that we are getting. The URL is not defined, so for that here in script we can create data, and data returns an object, so it's going to be object, and they're going to be URL, which is going to be null by default. Now as this is a property, and we call this property here URL, so that's going to solve that error. Alright, so now we need to process the form, so we need to run a function or something, so let's deal with that. So here I'm just gonna say v on click, we want to run a function, and what that function is going to be, first of all I want to say dot prevent, so that it won't page refresh. So it will not allow page refresh there on click, and here we say shorten URL. Alright, now I copy this, go down there. Now for defining a function or method, we have here methods. Inside methods we create this method. For now I simply say works. Alright, let's see if it is working or not, and we have the error there still or not. Alright, compiled successfully, refresh the page. Now we have the error gone, you can see, and if I go there and hit there, we get works. So yeah, that's great. So go back to the file, and here we need to what we need to do now is that first of all I go back to URL shortener.blade and I want to check if user is logged in or not. So for that, what we can do, we can check using a function in Laravel we have. So I use prop. So we can pass a prop in Vue.js, and so here where we are calling this Vue.js component, we can say, we can give it any name. So I'm going to give here authorized dash user, and then I say, and here I'm gonna use the Laravel variable to check if user is logged in or not. So it's gonna be auth, all right, and then user, and then ID. So if user is logged in, they're going to pass, it's going to pass an ID here. Otherwise, it is going to pass null. This can say. So if this is present, pass this, otherwise pass null. So this is going to pass. We can save this. Now in URL shortener file, we can look for this prop. So here, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go here down, and here I'm gonna say props array, and in array authorized, and spelling should be correct, user. Now if you notice that we passed it with the dash here, and there it is completely capitalized, so be careful about that. Now as we are doing this, we can put an if condition. So what I do I go back to top where we have our form, and here I simply say here a div, and in this div I say if. So this is an if statement, and it's going to check authorized user. So we are passing an ID. So if it is going to be an ID, it is going to be more than 0. And if we pass any number in if statement, that becomes true. So we are passing just the authorized user. If it is going to be null, this div won't work, because this only requires a number to work here now. And inside it, we can put this form like this. Now we also need, if user is not logged in, then we can say here another div, and this time it is going to be else. So this is going to be, if there is null, it is going to fire here. All right. So for the else, I'm just going to pass here h5, and here I'm going to say you are required to register. With us, I think. Alright, and we can give the buttons straight away here. So I simply say here anchor tag, and in anchor tag I'm going to say register, and then it's going to be small. It's a small register here. I'm just gonna copy paste this, or login here. This is gonna go to the login page if the user is not logged in. Okay, you're required to register with us, and that's it. Or we can also add here to shorten your URLs. Sure. Save this and recompile. Now refresh here. Alright, now we have here you're required to register to shorten your URLs. So user needs to register now. So let's go. So register. And I don't think so. Yeah, the table is empty. We don't have anything. So we need to run the migration. So when we ran the scaffolding for our login pages, we automatically generated the migration files. So if I go to database and migrations, here we have few tables, and one of the table is user table so we can register after running this migration. So for that, what we need to do, we go back here and we say PHP artisan migrate, and it is going to create the database tables for us. So if I go back here now, refresh, and we have the table. Now as we have tables, we can register now. So let's do that. So I go back here in our app and register. Test at gmail.com, and then I'm going to say 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 and register. And we are registered now. Now as we are registered, we can go back to the home page, and now we can see the input field, and we can pass here some placeholder as well because it's not looking fine. So you get the idea. If user want to shorten the links, they will be logged in that case. Alright, go back here, and I'm gonna go to the input first of all, and I'm gonna place a placeholder here. Put URL here. Alright, now what we need to do, we need to have a button, and we need to have an output area. So what I'm going to do, I want to create a property. It's going to be here. We're going to say URL not found. Set it to null. Go back here below the button. After form closes, I'm going to put a PR. And then we want to say a p tag, and here in p tag I want to say VF, and it's going to be URL not found. So if we want to check if it's true or false, we can say here this. So this means it is false. So here I would say class, and here I want to say alert, and here alert danger. Alright, and here inside this we want to say URL is not valid. So we're gonna check that, and this will work when we work with the URL not valid. So as we're checking for the false, we can by default set it to, instead of null, we can pass it true. And go here, and yeah, we need to turn it to false to show this error. Alright, and then it will work. Now I also want to allow user to copy the ungenerated URL. So just by clicking, user can copy. So for that, I'm gonna go here, and just below the alert here, we want to create a div, and I'm gonna give it a class of copy link. And here we can say margin bottom 5. Inside it, what I want to do, I want to say span, and I want to give it an ID of output and underscore URL. Alright, and also here we want to say span with ID of clip and board. So it's going to be BOARD, board. Alright, now here what we want to do, we want to run a function. So if we run a function, we can say we on click. So we on click, again dot prevent. And what do we want to do? We want to run a function. It's going to be copy content. So this function will copy the content for us. And here I want to say variable again. So this is going to be variable. So I'm going to say here copy text string. We don't have it currently, so let's make it working. So we go back here at the bottom and paste it here, and the string will be like copy text to clip board. Alright, so this is the string. This is going to show this message here, and on click this is going to copy the content. So as we have the copy link here on top, we can hide this by default because we don't want to show it straight away. So here at the bottom I'm going to pass style, and in style we want to pass the copy link, and I want to set it to display to not by default. Now the clipboard, this clipboard, I want to give it some styling as well, so I'm going to have the styling for it as well. So here ID clip to block, so that is going to have full width, margin top, I say let's say 28 pixel, and then we need background color. Alright, so we want here 03 CB and F8 bluish color. Now then we're gonna have color, which is gonna be the white color, and font weight, and let's pass 900, so it's going to be bold, and font size to be 17 pixel is fine, I think. Now also when the user work, and here I say hover, and user if hovers, we want to change the background color. I want to change it to the dark color, so here. Now also if this, or what I do, simply copy and paste this to save time, and do. Now this time we want to have in color going to be the dark color. CSS is enough, I think. Save this, and now it should be looking fine. So we have this shorten URL function. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to process it. So as first thing I say let self is equal to this. So here what I'm going to do, another thing is I'm going to pass another variable. It's going to be let, and I say new URL, and I'm going to put the current URL in it, and we will process it from there. So here we want to break whatever URL user passes, so we say let and new array, because whatever user passes we're going to break it in array, so it's going to be new URL, as we just pass the URL inside new URL. So here we want to say dot split. I want to split it with slash. So here we're going to say like this, and then we want to create a counter. So what I want to do is simply say let counter, by default set to 0, and at last we want to create a random string. So for creating a random string, I say let result new URL, and I want to pass here math function, math.round, and inside it what we want to do, we want to say math.poll, and here we say 36,8. So if I pass here, let's say 7,3, that means 7 into 7 into 7 3 times. So that's what I'm doing here. And here then we're gonna say minus math.random to generate a random number, and whatever random number we get, we're gonna multiply it. So math.poll again, and I'm gonna say here 36 and 8. Alright, now after this we want to say toString, so whatever it generates till 36, and splice. Alright, don't splice. Yeah, it's actually slice. So okay, so we have it here, that's fine. Now what we need to do, let me make it bigger here, and now we can we want to check if the URL is valid or not. So I'm gonna run a for loop. It's a simple approach. So it's going to be let I equal to 0, and then I is if less than new array dot length. All right, and then we say I plus plus. And here inside the loop, what we want to do, we want to say if, because we are checking the length from this, we can loop through this variable, and this variable has all the values from URL. So we can say here new array, we pass I, so each loop it will when this is going to check the values. Here I want to say HTTP. All right, so also just going to copy and paste this, and I'm going to go here. So we get HTTP, HTTPS. So if it is this, what do we want to do? We want to increase the counter. So we say counter plus plus. All right. The same way, I'm going to copy this again, paste here. The another thing we want to check is if counter is 0. So if here we check if counter equals 0, then what do we want to do? So what do we want to do then? We say let new array 1. And what do we want to do? We will say new URL dot split, and we want to split it with dot. Okay, and then we want to say if new array 1, which we just got from here, and I want to pass here I from the loop, and we want to compare it if it is equal to www. So it is going to be counter plus plus again. All right, you might be thinking like, what is going on here? So let's first check here. When we pass a URL, it is going to break URL with slashes. So I'm going to first console log here, and we're gonna get the new array here. So what I can do, I can cut this from there, and I'm going to take it here so that we get to see all the values at once. Now here we are saying if it is 0, we get new array 1, so I pass that here. Alright, now let's go back here. First we need to re-render it, so npm run dev, sorry. Alright, so if I go back, we're going to copy the URL. I just copy this one and paste here. And then we're going to hit process. Okay, we get the error. So it's v on URL is not defined. Okay, this URL is going to be this .url. Now we also pass this in self, so we can say here self.url. Alright, so basically we are checking if URL has the HTTP, then increase the counter. If it doesn't have HTTP or HTTPS, we are checking for www. So if URL has this, so let's see if we are getting this time. Recompile here and refresh. Now I copy the URL. I think I already have copied. Yeah, process. Cut this and paste here. Also put this too, so we can see what this is doing. Recompile again. Paste the URL, process. So we get the HTTP and we get the long URL. You can see that this array is coming from the first value, and this is the generated numbered characters from here. So new array is here. Here, this is the array. So we have these two values here, HTTP and this. So HTTP and this, as found, we increase the counter. As counter increased, we never reached this statement, so that's why we didn't work the console log previously. So what I do, I simply remove this as it is working so far. So also I'm gonna create another variable here. It's gonna be let new URL dot index of position of it, and we can put here .com. Now you can check for .net or anything you want to check. If you want to do that, you can make it more advanced. So here simply I'm gonna say if this is more than 0. Alright, so it's more than equal to 0, then we increase the counter as well. Okay, so it's an increment operator that we're using, plus plus. So it's going to increase it by 1. Now the only thing we need to do here is afterwards, if the counter is equal to 0, because after checking all the URL, if it's still 0, that means self.url not found is equal to false. So we're gonna give the error. And then we say else, we need to process it. So for process, we need to say here let, and they're going to be current URL, and I want to say here a complete URL basically. So it's going to be window dot location dot href, and now we are creating a URL. So it's going to have u and slash. So you can put anything you want to put here. Basically we're going to have u and then some random text that will be the new URL. So here I'm going to say plus, and if you remember, we are generating random text here. It's a new URL, so it's just going to copy paste that here. And if I console log this, you can see that we will have a new URL, a short one. Alright, so I simply run the compiler. Now here we have the URL. Copy this first and refresh, and then I paste the URL and process. You can see that now we have the localhost and then /u and then the random string. So this is the new short URL. So that's, if you want to put something else here, you can put something else. It's totally up to you. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to remove this, and here I'm going to say axios dot post, and we're going to use axios to post our content, and here I say the URL slash shorten. This is going to be the route where we want to send the data, and the data is going to be URL. It's going to be the new URL, and then short link that we just created. It's going to be the current URL, and this new URL is here, the one we are checking. We are getting the original URL and new URL, so that is passing. So we are passing the old URL as well as new URL both. And once this is done, what do we want to do here? We want to say then we want to say function, and this function will get the response simply. So here we say response. Inside it, what we want to do, we want to say I want to create a variable here So I go back up, comma, and I say response, null by default, and we can say here self dot response. So this is the variable we just created, will receive the response dot data in it, so we can use that then. Alright, so far so good. We can also console log this in the self.response to see what is happening. Now we don't have this route, let's work with that. So we go to the web, and here what we need to do, we need to create the route. So I go here and simply I say route, and it's going to be a post route. So you want to pass here shorten, make sure spellings are correct. Now we don't have the controller created for it, so we need to create one. So let's do that. So I go back here and I'm gonna say PHP artisan make controller, and controller name going to be URL shortener controller. Alright, so we have the controller name here. Go back here, paste that name here. It's a class, a comma. Now we need to make a function, so I just call a store function. Alright, and currently we don't have this URL included, so let's do that. Controller included, so we say app /http, and this is the directory where this controller is, so controllers, and then we have the controller. So if you go here, you will see that controller, URL Shortener controller, and here store old and new URL in database. So here I say public function store. Alright, so this function is going to be responsible for saving the content. Now here we're gonna get the request, so we want to say here request $request. Now to use the request, we have it included on top, so make sure you have it included. Now once you have it included, we're gonna run a try statement. So try and then catch. Alright, now in catch we need the exception, so exception just to catch the errors. And here I want to save, just display the errors in case we get the error. Alright, and on top we want to use exception. Now in try statement we need to write the code for storing our content. So here we are checking for user is logged in or not, but you can check it here as well if you want to. It's totally optional, as user won't see the page even when the user is not logged in. But if you want to check it, in that case I'm going to add it here as well. So we simply use the same function auth and user ID. So it's like if it is set, do this. So here what I want to do, I'm going to say long URL, and that's going to be $request and get URL. Gonna copy this, and this one is going to be the new generated URL. So it's gonna be short link. So these are the two values we are passing, if you remember here, and we are receiving these values here, so it's gonna work. Now what we need to do, we need to check if the values are there. So I simply say $long URL is not equal to empty string, and also just copy paste this here, and this variable goes in here. So this shouldn't be empty, these are empty, don't do anything. Otherwise, $URL found. So we need to run a query here. So I need to create a model, and we need to create a table as well. So for that, what we do, we simply go back here and we create one by one. So first of all, we say PHP artisan make model, URL model, and by -m we can create migration. So you can see that we have model and URL migration. So now if I go back here, app models, we have a URL model, so we will be using it, and also we have migration in our database. So database migration, and here URL table. All right, so now user needs to store the URLs. So for that, we are going to create here $table, and we want to have the, let's call medium text like this, and then we want to pass here old URL. So it's going to be the URL user provided. So we need it. It can't be nullable or anything. We just need to have it. Then I copy paste this. The next is going to be the new URL. That's going to be the generated one. And also this is required. So we need another thing we can store is the user detail. So we can get the user underscore IP address if you want, and we can pass it as nullable. So if it is important for you, then you can skip it, otherwise it's fine. Now, as in our application, we are checking user login, so we can get the user ID as well, so we can pass. In case you don't want to pass user ID, you can set nullable. So I pass nullable just like that. All right, so it's the user ID. We can pass it as integer. All right, and yeah, that's it. Now here, if all goes fine, it's going to create the table. If all goes wrong, it's going to drop the table URLs. Okay, so I save this. We need to run the migration. PHP artisan migrate again, and it creates a table for us. So go back there, and here refresh. Now we go to the URLs. We have a table with the exact structure. Okay, so here across this, now we have URL model. We can call this model, and if you want to add some changes to this model, you can do that as well. So you can define the username, table name, if you, in case you want to. So we can do that. So first of all, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back here. I'm going to say URL. So we are calling the model, and now as we are calling it, we need to include it on top. So here, use app / models / URL, and we have access to it. And here, what I want to do, I want to say where, and what do we want to check? We want to check the old URL. So we want to check if there is old URL present. $long URL. Alright, then get, and we want two values. We want ID, and also want the new underscore URL. So get these values. If you want to get these values as an array, you just pass to array at the end, and you will get an array. So let's get an array here. Now what do we need to do? We need to check. So here we can simply say if empty $URL found, then we can do something, and in other case we can do something else. So here, so what I do, I simply say if not empty first, and inside it we can say return. That means we already have a new URL store, so just return that. So we simply say here $URL found and 0, and then inside it it's going to be the new underscore URL. So it is going to return an array, and we are getting the first element and getting the new URL as we are getting the new URL there. And we're going to see in a moment what the output is going to be. And here, because we currently don't have any, so we need to work with else as well. So let's add here. So we need to store a new URL. So we say new URL. We are calling the model here. So it's going to be $URL table. Okay, so we need to store values. So we say $URL table. And the value is going to be old underscore URL is equal to $long URL. Okay, copy this. Now here, going to be the new URL, which is going to be equal to new generated URL. Then we have the user table user underscore ID. So we can pass here auth user ID. If it doesn't pass it, otherwise it is going to be nullable, so no problem about that. We also have the user IP, so user URL table user underscore IP. And we can get the user IP using this. Now at last we need to save it. So we say here URL table save. And it should save the record for us. Alright, so if it saves, what we can do, we need to return the new URL. So if, we can simply say here, you can even pass the save statement in if condition, it will execute anyway. So we remove this and pass it here. And so it executes, it saves. If it saves, return new URL. So we say return $URL table, and what we want to return new underscore URL. Alright, save this, and yes, it should do the trick. So let's do that and let's check if it is working or not. So go back to URL Shortener. Here we are passing everything. Okay, let's see. So I re-enter the component. And refresh. Alright, so we have here URLs. Currently it is empty. So I'm gonna get this URL, paste here, process. We get the URL here, network, shorten URL response, we have the return URL. And if we go to database, we have the URL saved. Wonderful. So we have user IP and user ID and timestamp. We have also the URL. So in the live server, you will have your website domain here and the URL going to like this. You can replace this U to anything. That's totally up to you. Alright, so now currently if I go to this URL, it's not going to do anything. So if I go and paste here 404, we don't have it. So let's fix that. So for that, we need to go back to the web.php, and I think I have open it here. So here what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna create another route. So this one route was to basically going to redirect the user once the user comes to the short URL. So we say route, and this is going to be get request. We want to check for /u/any. So we are just matching it if it is having u. So this is the keyword that you will be assigning in your when you be saving URL. You can see here. So we are just checking that, and based on that we can pass here the controller. So I'm just gonna paste this, and here I'm gonna create a function that it's gonna be handled. All right, great. Now we need to create this function. So let's go there. I copy the name here, go to the controller, and now this is our class ending there, and here I say function handle, and we want to say $_server. It should be capital, make sure, and then request _URI. Alright, and then going to be $URL, and here we call our model, so it's going to be URL there. Now we need to check that, because we are going to get the new URL from user, so we want to check here new _URL. Right, so if I basically what I do is simply get these first and dd here like this, and I'm going to comment these 2 lines right now. Now I go back to the browser because we have 404 here, refresh, you can see now change, we have the short URL coming up here as well as the request coming up here. So what do we need to do now? Go back to the code editor. So if we go back to the database, and if you notice the new URL is complete URL. Now if you want to compare it with the ID, you can do this. You can store only this portion or this portion, you know, and you can compare it with that. But there is a easy way to do it. We already getting the URI, which is going to be the current URL, and the URL here, and we are going to check if this is present in our database. I'm going to comment this one out. We have this here, and we say we are new URL, and we're going to use the like statement this time. So it's going to be like. Alright, and here we pass %, and then we want to put dot, and then $URI, then dot, and then %. Right, and now we want to get the old _URL. Okay, now here we need to put a check. So also we can put the try catch statement here. So let's do that. So simply try catch, and we have exception $E, and here we pass dd $E. Exception requires an E. And here I just cut and paste this. Okay, so we get the old URL. Here we check if $URI is equal to empty, or $URL is equal to empty, or count of $URL and is equal to 0. Then do something. Now we are checking URI. You can check the for this before it here. So if I put another condition here, if, and simply cut this statement, put here, and I say here return abort, and this is going to be 404, and same goes here, return abort 404, and we need to remove this. Alright, now if this is not the case, we have the data, then what do we want to do? So we say else return $URL 0 and old _URL.
Okay, so this is going to return the old URL. So let's see what we're getting first of all. So I simply dd this dollar $URL, because otherwise if this is not the format, we will get the error. Go here, actually refresh the page, we get collection. Now here in collection we have 0 first, and size 0 we have the original old URL coming up here. So that's what we're getting. We're getting 0, and then we're getting the old URL. So yeah, this should be fine. So if I remove this time, it's not gonna DD anything. And now refresh. So we get this URL here. Now as we are getting the URL and we are printing it, that's not what we want. We want user to redirect there. So what we can do, basically, we have a function from Laravel, and that's redirect. So it is going to redirect the user. So only refresh the page now, and it's taken there. Now for the finishing up, I just want one more thing. So we added the clipboard thing here. It's not working currently, so let's make it work before completing this. So I go back to the URL Shortener view file. Here we have our function. So this function currently is to shorten the URL. Now here we need to create another function, and that is just going to deal with the copy content. So let's do that. So here I say copy content. Let's check if this is exactly the name here. So yeah, copy content. So what do we want to do? Alright, so before working with this, when we get the URL, user generates the URL, we need to display the button. So for displaying the button, if you remember, we added the copy link display none, so we can simply fade in that. So here what I do, simply I say dollar, and I'm going to say here dollar dot the class name, copy link. Now you can set a view property as well, in case if you want to do that way. I just want to show you that you can use the jQuery as well inside it. So totally up to you. So here we have that this will display, right? Now we don't have the jQuery included in our project. So if I go to app.play here, we are having our content. And if you see, we don't have any jQuery file here. So we need to put a CDN, jQuery CDN. So I'm gonna copy CDN here at where the body is ending, just right there, so that we can have the access to jQuery. Go back here, and here inside this function, now we need to write some code. So let's do that. So here what we're gonna do, I wanna create a variable that and I'm gonna say ID, and it's gonna get using jQuery, and I'm gonna say ID of P1. Alright, and there is an event. So this event is select event. So it is gonna select the value. Now I wanna use if you remember, we have let me show you, let me re-render it. Refresh. So currently we don't have that button showing up. So if I go and get the URL and paste here, process, we get this, right? So we added this text. If you remember, we need to use this text. So this text is coming from this variable. So we can update this like the content is copied, so we can simply do it by here. So we said this dot copy text string, and we want to change it to URL copied successfully. So user just clicked on it and it copied, and we say document dot exec command, and the command we want to run is copy. Alright, and then at last we want to update the URL. This dot URL is going to be this dot response. So what I want to do when we click process, it should display the new URL here first, and then we click on copy and we can get it from there. So for updating the URL, what I do is simply first, what I'm going to do, I'm going to say here, because this input has a vModel working on it, and if you go here, input vModel is URL, so we can update this vModel. It's going to work anyway, so this is going to pass into it and it's going to be updated. Now I re-render it, so let's go back here, refresh. I get the URL, and here I paste the URL and process URL. You can see now it is updated. Now you can do it using jQuery as well. I'm going to show you if I remove this. Alright, to do it that way, simply what I do is I'm going to get the class, copy link. Now if you go to copy link, this is here, and we have the form just next to it, and they both share the same parent div, so they are siblings. So what we can do, we can use the jQuery, and on using jQuery we can update it. So simply I'm gonna say here dot, and here we say siblings, and in siblings we want to search for with the class of form, and then here we want to find basically the input with P1, the element with ID P1. So it's gonna get it, and then we can set the value to it, and that value is going to be either response or data or self response, whatever you prefer. You can pass here. Alright, so this should fix it, and we should have the working. So let's see, go here, recompile, and refresh. I get the URL again, go back here, paste here, process, and you can see that we have the link working. Now what we need to do, we need to click here and correct this, that it's making it empty. We can remove this, actually it's just going to be the select event. So here we are setting this URL, and this it should be response, not a spelling mistake. It's crucial here. So what I do, simply, it should be working now, so let's check. So here and we refresh the page and go here and copy this. Now I paste it here and process URL. It updated, copy the text, it stays there. URL copied successfully, so I go here and paste. You can see that now it is copying the converted URL, not the original.